Good morning, everyone. It is day 4 here at the Woods Hole Film Festival, and I'm joined by two wonderful filmmakers this morning for today's Q&A. The Woods Hole Film Festival is happening right now. You can go watch films right after this wonderful chat, and all the films are available through August 1st. So why don't we start by having Samia introduce herself and her film.
Hello, my name is Samia Staley, and my film is called Desert Flight. It is about the sport of show jumping. It is a love letter to this sport and the passion that drives it. It basically, we went and talked to top horse riders and Olympians, and also spoke with people whose lives had been transformed by horses.
Awesome. I know you're in the film yourself as well.
That's right. Yeah, I'm a show jumper as well, amateur.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, now we'll head over to Ansley.
I'm Ansley Floyd. I made the short documentary film called The Mountain Dogs, which is about two golden retrievers who have a peculiar habit, which is to hike up to the top of a very challenging trail to the top of a mountain in Stowe, Vermont. And they do it every day by themselves without their owners. And they're sort of local celebrities. People know them as the Mountain Dogs. And it's a story about animal agency, I would say.
They're the cutest dogs. They're so adorable.
I agree.
I had so much fun watching it and just kind of like cooing over how cute they are.
I'm a dog person too.
So many dogs. There's so many dog people out there because dogs are just, you can't not love dogs. And you also can't not love horses either. Got two great animals represented on this call. So kind of the topic that we kind of grouped your films under was humans and non-humans. So it kind of makes sense. I think the first thing I wanted to kind of discuss was what inspired you to kind of create and embark on these projects? What drew you to wanting to make these films?
Sure. So in the making of Desert Flight, it's a little bit of an accidental movie. I was very engaged in this sport as an amateur and wanted to put something together just to show my family because I couldn't get them to come to me. And then mechanically what kicked in was the fact that I had been a TV producer for Associated Press. And as we're putting this little film together like a passion project, I kind of looked around and realized, but over there is this Olympic gold medalist, and over there is an anchor for the Olympic team for this year, and over there is a legend. And I realized in my past life, if I had missed interviews with these people, I would have been yelled at by my editor. And so that instinct kicked in and we turned the cameras toward them. And that ended up being just such a rewarding experience because of the conversations that we then had. And I just realized how much I could relate to these people and how much they could relate to me. And so they took the energy from there, I feel, and that's where the success of the movie comes from.
I loved all of your interviews. All the people were really well spoken, and I loved hearing about how accomplished they are, because in a lot of instances they're very, very successful, but not many people know about how successful they are and how talented they are. So that was really cool to kind of get a look into this world I don't think many people know a lot about.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's fun to educate people about this sport because it's so ancient anyway. You don't get that very much in the United States because we don't have that same background with horses. But in Europe, horses were part of everyday farming life for hundreds of years, and then of course warfare, which is where the sport actually comes from, is warfare. And, obviously back then it was not an enlightened time, but in the meantime come these partnerships that get weaved between a rider and a horse in an adrenaline, high risk precision sport, which of course is not going to happen unless the rider trusts the horse and the horse has a passion for what he's doing. And so you end up getting a friendship out of the deal. And that's what we enjoyed sort of developing and telling that story in the film. When, interestingly, a lot of these people who are celebrities in our sport, that was a little bit of a rediscovery for my immediate audience was essentially other writers on the same show circuit that I'm on. And they rediscovered these people too, because we see each other every day. We see them in the warm-up ring. They become people who are kind of in the way. Is he going to take my jump? And all of a sudden we look at our own world and say, well, this is pretty special. And it was really nice that way too.
Next, let's head over to Ainsley. And how did the Mountain Dogs come to be?
Sure. So I was introduced to Samson and Baylor, the two dogs in the film, while I was hiking. I was hiking the Pinnacle Trail with some friends who live locally, so they're familiar with the Stowe community. And we were sort of hiking up a very steep portion of the trail, and we were overtaken by these two huge golden retrievers who seemed to be on their own. And when I asked my friends about them, they said, "Oh, yes, yes, they're the Mountain Dogs. They climb this trail every day." And it was sort of a light bulb moment. I thought, that's when I began to dream about the possibility of following them up and making a film about them.
They're such, I loved the shots of when you put the camera on the dog and you can kind of see what they're seeing. And it was such a cool, I never thought about the fact that there are dogs out there that can go up this trail. So it was really fun it was such a fun film to kind of follow along with their path.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do think what makes it interesting is the fact that they are pets. They are owned by a family who loves them. Not many pets are allowed to sort of choose how they spend their time. They're on leashes, they're in cages, they're at home. So it's interesting to look at two animals who are sort of allowed to choose and to see what they choose. And I think they've made a really interesting choice.
I think they did too. And that kind of segues into my next question for both of you is, what was it like trying to make a film with live animals? Because obviously, when you're directing people, it's much easier to kind of tell them what to do and where to go. But both of your films have this component of, I'm working with these live animals that I can't, directly, talk to and have a conversation with. So did you find that, it was more difficult than working with people? Was there a lot of footage that kind of had to be scrapped along the way because of the animals? What was it like working with them?
Well, in my world, it's so structured and it's so very much writers and animals at work. So in that sense, it was easy enough to capture the process because they get warmed up in the morning, they get put on the lunge line, they get cleaned up, and you see the grooms at work putting the horses together and so forth. I think and obviously they go in a show ring, so that's a staged area. In that sense, we had no trouble gathering a lot of visual material. What was a little more fun is also showing the interaction between horses and their colleagues, in essence. And I discovered very quickly, but I've known this for a little while, some of them are just hams. I mean, I've got horses who I can very confidently say, let's walk up and down the aisle. This one's like this one's like that. That one always takes a little nip. This one always licks me like a Labrador. And they enjoy the attention. So it was good to try to capture some of that. I'd like to do more of that actually down the line.
I think this is a really great question because this was my biggest challenge, I would say, in making this film. So I have a background in photojournalism. So I've been trained to sort of not interfere with what I'm photographing or filming. And I wanted the film to be as accurate as possible about what these dogs experience as they climb this mountain. So with that in mind, trying not to interfere with their progress, but also keeping up with them, first of all, on this very challenging hike while I'm carrying all my gear, was daunting. And I ended up hiking with them to the top 4 times in order to gather enough footage. So sort of anticipating where they were going to go and trying to get ahead of them so I could get them coming towards me and get the variety of shots I needed without, you know, enticing them with treats or sort of falsifying what people are seeing was a real challenge.
Yeah, I can't imagine how many ways it could go wrong, but also how many ways it can go right. And obviously enough went right that we were able to have these great films. Kind of continuing on, I know in Desert Flight, there's this huge emphasis on the relationship that gets built between the horse and the owner. And I think also in the Mountain Dogs, you see how happy all these hikers become when they see these dogs coming. And why do you think, kind of, this is probably a little bit more of a philosophical question, I guess. So why, as people, do you think we're so drawn to animals and wanting to form these connections that are worthy of being on film, because they're just such that deep connection?
Well, I think, there's a little bit of that mystery that wants to be unraveled, and to my mind, an increasing consciousness of the fact that animals are essentially people, have a huge amount of different personalities and lots to say. So those of us lucky enough to spend a lot of time with animals are realizing that the only real barrier is the fact that they don't have language. And not having a common language creates such a huge distance. And our current culture is basically saying that animals are just like in a completely different universe. But when you spend time with them and work with them, you discover instead that they understand much, much more about what they're doing. And as well, the rewarding part of it isn't just that we're drawn to animals, but luckily, a lot of these animals are drawn to us. And what is that about? What's with all these conversations that we actually can have with animals? And my trainer loves to make fun of me because I say I have conversations with my animals, and he'll say in his Argentinian accent, why don't you go talk to your horse, have a conversation? And he thinks it's funny, but I think I'm convincing him, because it's a matter of expectation and perspective. If you're very open to the idea that horses and whatever animal you're with actually understands their world more than you think and have more to say than you think, that expectation in turn allows you to see exactly those things happening. I've had horses get mad because they thought they had advanced to the next round, and as it turns out they hadn't, and she bucked and squealed in frustration, and that's not, it's beyond anecdotal for me. It's just self-evident at this point. And I think that there's probably going to be an increasing interest in animal stories because just generally we're, I think, becoming more and more aware of that fact, that they're way more interesting and aware than we give them credit for.
I couldn't agree with you more, Samia. I think that generally speaking, people underestimate the intelligence of animals. But I do feel like that's slowly changing as we learn more about genetics and biology. And this is really a main theme that I wanted to underscore in the Mountain Dogs is how much animals enrich our lives and the sort of symbiotic relationship we have with them, that we give each other so much joy. And I do believe animals have different personalities. I mean, anyone who has a pet would tell you the same thing. But I think that extends, beyond pets. Any sort of animal you meet in the forest is going to be, squirrels are different from one another. And I think it's important for people to think about that and realize that, because it has huge implications to how we treat animals.
Agreed. I think there's that seeing is believing element. What's very interesting to me is how media and video can actually contribute to that process. If you look at YouTube now, you can just look up so many videos that now people with their phones can capture moments that tell us so much more about animals. Horses at play, a horse fitting itself into the kiddie pool, or just any number of incidents that used to be, you're not going to believe what my pet did, or you're not going to believe what this mountain lion did when we were at the picnic. You know, it's like before then it was just the, you know, very, very anecdotal, but now the internet is just flooded with what I can only call evidence to the contrary of what we currently think about animals. To me, that's very interesting.
Oh, I completely agree with both of you. I think my Twitter feed is mostly just me retweeting videos I see of dogs doing cute things that I think are adorable. So definitely agree with both of you. Ansley, you kind of talked a little bit, mentioned fiends and how going into the film and having an idea of what you wanted the fiends of your film to be. Did you ever find that, you know, when you approached the project, was there one theme you wanted to really get across that you weren't able to, or were there any new themes that over the course of filming that really became so much more prominent in the story than you anticipated?
Yeah, so the latter is true. That was actually one of the challenges of making this film. I didn't want it to be similar to any sort of cute dog film that you might see on YouTube, which I have no problem with, by the way. I love those. But I obviously wanted this film to have larger themes and have more meaning than that. So when I began to gather the footage, I sort of grappled with what that would be. But the longer I spent with the dogs, the more evident it became, more clear it became what those themes were. I went into it with sort of an idea of having it be compassionate about relationships between non-humans and humans. So that theme, I think, was consistent throughout the filmmaking. The theme that kind of presented itself later was about the mortality of the animals and the brevity of life and how these creatures have chosen to spend their life. That sort of surfaced as I started editing.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, was kind of talking about both of your films kind of have these kind of subtle moments of, how letting go and saying goodbye. And, Samia and Desert Flight, a lot of the writers kind of talk about like the horse of their life. And there's, even if it's not completely stated, it's kind of, you kind of get the feeling that, horses retire, horses die. And, I think, and it's the same with mountain dogs, that these dogs are 11 now. So how did, the themes of letting go and saying goodbye, how was that approaching those themes and putting them kind of in the film, and how did you handle them in the films in a way? Or just how did you just come to decisions about how you're going to handle them? Sorry, I ramble sometimes when I'm like trying to I know what question I want to ask, but I'm trying to get to it. So let me know if you want any clarification.
Well, saying goodbye to animals, obviously, because of their lifespan, put us in touch with that goodbye moment more frequently than with people. What's interesting about that journey, if you're lucky, is you get to experience the life well lived, and the journey of leaving the world done by an animal is in many ways more beautiful, more stoic, and more peaceful than our very conflicted processes. Horses and a life well lived to a horse. It's hard to describe, but I guess what I'm saying is that they come into it with a lot more acceptance, a lot less thinking, a lot less anguish, and they basically ask to go when the time comes. And so that is sort of like, honestly, a little like being with a spiritual guide for people, because our brains are just off the charts active and overthinking all the time, and just having the ability to hang out with a different life philosophy, as it were. That's very profound. And I think that maybe comes through in the story. Flexible is still very much alive, but of course we all know that there's going to be a parting at all times.
Well, that was beautifully said. I'm not sure I can add much to that, but yeah, the dogs, you have to wonder, are they even aware that they're mortal? animals, do they know? Obviously they have fear of pain, and maybe that extends to fear of death, but we don't know. And in a way, it's sort of blissful ignorance, right? I mean, they don't anticipate what's going to happen to them necessarily in terms of their death, so they just enjoy every moment. And I think we can learn a lot from animals in that respect.
I definitely think you can learn. I think everything you're saying is really resonating with me, because I think that animals do have personalities, and you can learn a lot from them. And I think sometimes people are kind of dismissive and being like, oh, that's just an animal, but I think they really do, I think, add a lot of value to our lives. So
just very quickly, I feel like on a base level, animals do in fact understand mortality generally, and might even understand when they're winding down. Certainly you see them fight for their lives, tooth and claw, given that, and so they have that same instinct that we do to protect life. And again, we can't ask them that question, but I do think that we can share with them that certain amount of knowledge. I'm not sure that they're not privy, as it were, but again, they don't have this overactive thought process either that basically dwells and overplays on that reality. And so again, I do think they're essentially capable of embracing their blissful ignorance as well.
Perfect. Well, so I guess we've been talking about, what we've all kind of learned from animals. What did you guys kind of learn about yourselves as filmmakers, making these films about animals?
I'm going to pass that one to Ansley while I think on
Sure.
that, if I can.
Sure. I mean, making this film was a joy from beginning to end. It was maybe one of the best professional moments of my career, of my life. And I think that's because it touched on themes that are meaningful to me. And it combined a bunch of things that I love. I love being outdoors. I love hiking. I love animals. I love the relationship between humans and animals. What was your question?
No, just kind of how did, working on this film, how did it affect you as both a person and as a filmmaker?
Okay.
Right. So it basically confirmed what I sort of already knew about animal intelligence and animal agency. Witnessing and really sort of unpacking what the animals were doing. It confirmed what I suspected, which was encouraging, I thought. And they aren't just hiking up there to get food at the top. They're hiking up there for community, a sense of community, sense of accomplishment, a sense of just being with people and enjoying attention and enjoying being outside and having the freedom to choose to do what they want to do.
I think interestingly, what affected me the most as a person is my experience with the other animals in this movie, and those are the human beings, and the way that we had a process of discovery just to realize what common ground there was. I mean, I went into this with such strong senses of, well, how do I feel about the sport? I definitely feel it from the heart, this and that and this and that. And then just imagining somehow that these eminent people will reinforce or confirm my theory, and to see all of that blossom, to see Olympians and top riders say, I share I'm going to say exactly what you're hoping I'm going to say, and to see that goodness in people emerge from every direction affected me as a person for sure. And then as a filmmaker, I've never done a documentary before, so it was just a huge learning curve of I mean, just so many themes were involved with this movie. There was is it sport, war, healing, chills and spills, therapeutic elements, and all of these were on Post-it notes. Like, well, if we put them in this order, that's out. That's not going to fit. So now we have to like put these Post-it notes so that trying to put these like little pearls together so that they actually continue was painful. It was a lot of work, and parting with material simply because, gosh, it's a legendary writer. It's Hap Hansen, and we have an interview with him, but we couldn't use it because it just wasn't going to fit in there in just the narrative. So that part of it was like just fighting an octopus, grappling with all of this stuff. And so there was a lot of learning there, I can tell you.
Wow, I did not realize that this was your first documentary. I never would have expected that. I think it doesn't look at all like a first documentary, like what I think of as a first documentary. So congrats. Well, it's really done.
Thank you, and I really need to, for that would be Tell Studios based in Detroit, Michigan. The guys at Tell Studios are extraordinarily talented, and the quality of their interview was phenomenal. It was Ryan Corral who was doing all of the interviews in essence, and he was the one who had such a good eye that he's asking these questions of one of our writers, Ashley Bond, and all of a sudden had noticed that she had tattoos and thought to ask about that, right? And here we've named this documentary Desert Flight. It's got to do with the sensation of flight when you ride a horse and how they were your first experience of flight, basically. So that's the theory. And again, the title came before the movie. So was it going to prove out? And she says, oh, yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, I have a tattoo shoulder to shoulder of a horse that's flying, a flying horse. And there it was. You'd think it had been planned. So, but that's Ryan. Interviews, I think, are super difficult. Even as a news producer, it's what I dreaded the most. I was a good editor, but doing an interview, you have to have your mind so open and your observation skills. And Ryan was able to really connect with all of his subjects. And then these guys, in addition, are just very artistic cinematographers. And so the imagery that, they do a lot of, this is interesting. Their stock and trade in many ways is absolutely everything corporate, whatever, and wedding videos. And so here we are having a screening of Desert Flight, and we were killing time just waiting for the audience, just trying to keep them entertained any old way. And they put on one of their video productions of a wedding, two total strangers. And we were all completely drawn in the whole time, so that when we pressed stop to play the movie, people were like, hey, I was watching this wedding video. So that was magic, to me, bringing talent together. So huge props, I think, to the guys at Tell Studios for sure, and John Azzoni. Yeah, lots of guys.
Yeah, and I like that you kind of mentioned interviews, because these are films on animals, but I think the interviews really do play such a great role in it, especially I guess Ainsley, how did the interview process, what was it like for the mountain dogs?
Well, so it was both difficult physically and easy interpersonally. I did have to carry all the gear up the mountain. Luckily, I had some generous family and friends who helped sort of Sherpa up equipment for me. But yeah, bringing a tripod up a mountain and setting up a camera and approaching strangers and asking them if they'd participate, those are difficult things. But the good news is there's such great enthusiasm about these dogs, and they really are sort of local celebrities. So people were just delighted to talk about them, to have an opportunity to talk about what these dogs meant to them on camera. So I had no trouble getting people to agree to an interview. And as you can see in the film, people are very excited and enthusiastic, and just sort of, they really have a larger meaning to the community. And I think that really comes through in a lot of the interviews.
Yeah, no, I definitely I love just how casual a lot of the interviews seemed. How it's just like you saw somebody on a path and you asked them, "Hey, look at the dogs right there. What do you think?" So I thought that was really well done and a really good decision to kind of include them in the film.
Thank you.
Of course. Another theme I kind of want to touch upon is that I think both of your films are very optimistic in a time where I don't necessarily think there's always a ton of optimism in films. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on how do you think optimism works in your films? Because I think you obviously have some heavier themes and heavier subjects, but ultimately, when you watch the films, and you're in Mountain Dogs, you're following along with these dogs and you're seeing how happy they make people, and in Desert Flight, you're seeing this wonderful relationship between the riders and the horses, and you see Mandy win the competition at the end. So how do you think optimism plays into your films?
Well, yeah, I think a life with animals is a life with the future. I actually do believe that there's almost like an imminent moment of enlightenment when we just cannot deny the intelligence and presence of animals. So it's easy to look to the future when you're doing that. When Will Simpson, that Olympic rider, says this is a time where we've stopped breaking horses and now we're training horses. In other words, we're inviting them to really succeed by understanding, their own sport. And he says, for me, that's an exciting time to be in this sport. So it makes you feel lucky to be in a community that's looking toward the future. And of course, in my sport, there's one very future compatible component of show jumping, which is that men and women already compete equally. There is no gender difference. We do not have female divisions. And already, you're in a sport where I've seen like a very top rider, Eric Lamaze of Canada, walk out of the ring knowing that an opponent of his is going in. And he said, Jill is going in. He was so worried. She's such a threat, and I remember thinking, but that's such a lucky thing to be in a sport that's already 3 or 4 steps into the future relative to many, many sports. So there's just a lot of reason to be optimistic when you're in that community.
Yeah, I really like that as well. It is kind of this gender equality in the sport, which I thought was really, really nice to see, especially as I love sports, and it's kind of disappointing sometimes when you see how much the NBA gets so much more attention than the WNBA. To kind of see more of an equal playing ground was really nice, and I like that the optimistic tone of it.
Yeah. Nice.
Ansley, what about you? How about optimism with the Mountain Dogs?
Sure. So this is actually something that I thought about a lot when I started making this film. A lot of wonderful documentary films touch on themes of social justice, or they're about people coping with tragedies. And the question in my mind was, is it worth making a film with sort of a lighter story? Is it going to be respected as a documentary film? But I think ultimately the answer is yes, that you can have documentary films about optimism, about serendipity, about whimsical things that happen in life. And all good narratives have deeper themes. And I think the deeper themes do come through in the Mountain Dogs, even though it is about something positive, something happy.
I love that you said, even though it was something happy.
Right. Well, I do believe that, rightfully so, a lot of people believe that the mission of documentary films is to reveal an injustice. And I 100% I agree with that. But I also think there is a place for just films about wonderful things that happen in life. And
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's just I'm so excited by what you're saying. I think it should be our mission as filmmakers to make people fall in love with something first. I actually feel a critique of many documentaries about nature. They're absolutely so stunning. I want to watch it. And then I don't watch all of that because I know that they're going to segue every single time into this is all going away. It's all going away, you know, and you walk away with that every time. And the thing is, we should separate that. We should tell stories that start happy and end happy, because it's how we fell in love with the topic in the first place. And so, yeah, there's almost too much of a heaviness out there that gets in the way, that actually will create a distance between a person and this beautiful nature documentary, versus if we could just immerse and relax, it would actually, to my mind, be more productive.
Well said.
Yeah, it's just as important to make people fall in love with it, so if they're passionate about saving it, than showing them all the things they need to save it from. So I think that was a really good point.
Yeah.
And well said by both of you. So we're starting to come to the end a little bit. So I just wanted to touch upon kind of the elephant in the room, why we're not in person. How has kind of COVID affected the lives of your films?
Samia, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Well, you know, our efforts to get it out there are more energized than ever, because now I feel like I've made a nice cheer up film just when we needed it. Yeah, we're all separated from what it is we're doing every day. And, you know, so if you're in a sport, you're show jumping and all of a sudden you're just not showing anymore, whatever, why not have a film that says, hey, here's why you love what you do. So here's a big cheer up movie. So it comes at the right time, makes me excited to get it out there. So we'd love to get it streaming internationally, for example. That's the next big step.
I wish you all the success with getting it international, especially when you're talking about how there's probably more people in Europe are probably more aware of show jumping a little bit more than the US. I'm sure there would be a ton of people who are just so really excited to see this film.
I hope so.
I've had a similar experience in that a lot of the feedback I received early on was that this is the perfect time for a film like this, because people are down. It is a tough time, and to have sort of a positive story to that has beautiful images of nature and happy themes, and it's just a good time to cheer people up. Really, it's a little levity right now.
Yes. Well, I guess, do you guys have any final things you would like to say to the Woods Hole audiences before we finish up?
Well, you know, I'm just loving your theme of optimism. Yeah, I think that we actually need much more of it. We've had, I think, a tendency to trivialize the positive and only give weight and credence to the negative. And yet there's human psychology to say that in your mind and your spirit, generally it takes 4 positive things to happen to negate a negative thing in your life. So we have to pile on the positive, if anything. I'm back to watching really great 1980s TV shows. Frankly, I'm going to watch my MacGyver because it's an exercise in optimism and happy endings. And so I say, go for it. Make positive, happy movies and bring us into the future with animals as well along the way.
Awesome.
I second everything that Samia said.
Perfect. Well, I just want to say thank you both for being here and this morning. It was really great conversation. I hope you guys had some fun, and I hope everybody watching had some fun as well. I never mentioned at the beginning of this, but I was one of the programmers, and I watched a lot of the shorts, and I worked with the screening committee that watched your shorts, and we knew from the beginning that we need to have both your films in it, because so many our screeners loved it and we're like, these are such great, happy, wonderful films that need to be at Woods Hole this summer. So I'm really happy that we were able to have both your films in the festival and talk with you this morning. So
okay. Thank you, Hannah, and nice job. You're doing these long interviews and you have great recall and wonderful questions. So thank you. I feel like I've made 2 new friends.
Perfect. That's what we want here. The Woods Hole Film Festival, like I said at the beginning, is happening now. All the films, including The Mountain Dogs and Desert Flight, are available to watch online from now until August 1st. Have a great rest of your day.